the kingdom shall be divided.
Now we will consider the history that fulfills this prophecy. The northern borders of the Roman Empire were the Rhine and Danube rivers. Julius Caesar named the regions east of the Rhine Germania. Within these regions lay a multitude of ethnic tribes. All these tribes have become known as the Germanic tribes. The Romans called them barbarians. Among these were the Angles, the Jutes, the Saxons, the Thuringians, the Vandals, the Suevi, the Burgundians, the Franks, the Alemanni, the Visigoths, the Ostrogoths, the Gepids, the Heruli, the Lombards, and the list goes on. For decades, various barbaric tribes were making continual incursions into Roman territory. The Roman army maintained the borders until the Huns appeared in Europe. The Huns were a savage nomadic people who originated from China. As the Huns moved toward the Germanic tribes, this ignited the great migration of the Germanic peoples into the weak Roman Empire. This was only about 25 years after Rome was divided between Constantine's three sons. In 351 AD, the Franks and Alemanni crossed the Rhine, never to return. The Alemanni settled in Agri Decimates, from the River Main to Lake Constance. They spread to the regions of Alsace-Lorraine and extended to Seine by 455 AD. The Franks settled in Gaul and extended to Somme and Seine by 455 AD. These two tribes are the roots of modern-day France and Germany.
The territory of these two great confederacies, the Franks and the Alemanni, is constantly spoken of by contemporary writers as Francia and Alemannia. We feel that we are standing on the verge of modern history when we recognize in these two names the France and the Allemagne of the French newspaper of today. Though other elements have been abundantly blended with each confederacy, it is not altogether forbidden us to recognize in these two barbarous neighbors of the Roman Empire in the 4th century the ancestors of the two mighty nations which in our own day met in thunder on the plains of Gravelotte.
As the Huns pushed into Europe in 370 AD, fear fell on all the barbaric tribes.
As warriors, the Huns inspired almost unparalleled fear throughout Europe. They were amazingly accurate mounted archers, and their complete command of horsemanship, their ferocious charges and unpredictable retreats, and the speed of their strategical movements brought them overwhelming victories.
As the Huns advanced into Germania, many tribes were forced aside like the bow wave of a ship. The Alani were dispersed and joined other Germanic tribes. The Huns drove the Ostrogoths, or the Eastern Goths, upon the Visigoths, or Western Goths, who were hemmed in by the Danube, but compelled to cross it into Roman territory in 376 AD. As a band of refugees, the Visigoths looked to the Eastern Roman Emperor for safety. After many years of cruel treatment at the hand of the Eastern Empire, the Visigoth king Alaric arose in 395 AD. Alaric led his people through Pannonia and into Milan by 408. Next, he advanced down the peninsula and sacked Rome in 410 AD. The Visigoths then moved into southern Gaul and finally settled in Spain by 466 AD.
Their depredations culminated in the sack of Rome in 410. In the same year, Alaric died and was succeeded by Ataulfus, who led the Visigoths to settle first in southern Gaul, then in Spain.
Not only the Goths, but other Germanic tribes could not withstand the rapid progress of the Huns. The Burgundians, Vandals, Suevi, and the Alani temporarily united, and on December 31, 406 AD, this confederacy crossed over the frozen Rhine and entered into Roman territory.
The victorious Confederates pursued their march, and on the last day of the year, 406, in a season when the waters of the Rhine were most probably frozen, they entered, without opposition, the defenceless provinces of Gaul. This memorable passage of the Suevi, the Vandals, the Alani, the Burgundians, who never afterwards retreated, may be considered as the fall of the Roman Empire in the countries beyond the Alps, and the barriers which had so long separated the savage and the civilized nations of the earth were from that fatal moment levelled with the ground.
The Burgundians settled in Burgundy in 420 AD and went on to spread over West Switzerland and the valley of the Rhine between 443 and 476 AD. The Suevi, Vandals and Alani moved down into Spain by 409 AD. In 418, the Alani king Atassus was killed by the incoming Visigoths. The Alani then offered their crown to the Vandal king Gunderic. As a result, the separate ethnic identity of the Alani was lost to the Vandals. As the Visigoths moved into Spain, they pushed the Suevi into Galicia, where they settled and established a kingdom which incorporated other small Germanic tribes like the Quadi, Buri and the Marcomanni, who had also left Germania. The Suebic kingdom spread throughout what is now Portugal by 466 AD. The Vandals, on the other hand, had an open door into North Africa. So it was in May 429 AD the Vandals crossed the Strait of Gibraltar and began their settlement. By 439, the Vandals spread their kingdom to the stronghold of Carthage.
The Vandals, as we know, ruled Africa from Carthage. The Burgundians were settled in the valley of the Rhine, and their chief capital was Lyon. The Suevi held the greater part of southern and western Spain, and their capital was Astorga.
While Spain was being overtaken, Rome pulled back its troops from Britain by 409 AD in order to protect territory closer to Rome. This action made the Roman British people vulnerable. Some Celtic tribes immediately took advantage of this situation. The Picts invaded from the north and the Scots from the west. However, the Celtic people were about to meet their match. A number of Germanic tribes had their sights set on Britain. The Saxons were invited by the Britons to help fend off the Picts and the Scots. So it was that the Saxons arrived on British soil.
They came by invitation of Vortigern, king of the Britons. The king gave them land in the southeast of the country on condition that they should fight against the Picts, and they did fight, and had the victory wheresoever they came. And then they sent for the Angles, and told them of the worthlessness of the people and the excellences of the land. This is the Saxon narrative.
The Saxons pushed the Picts back past the old Roman frontier, preventing the Celts from gaining control of Britain. But the Saxons turned against the Britons whom they had come to help. The Angles and Jutes from Denmark and the Frisians from France also joined the Saxons in the invasion of Britain. The native Britons were then pushed into the southwestern corner, known today as Wales. The Angles and Saxons then dominated the British island. So it is from 449 AD that the history of Angleland or England begins. 4 years after the Saxons placed their feet on British soil, the kingdom of Attila the Hun came to a sudden stop in 453 AD. As you have seen, many of the Germanic tribes escaped the Huns by migrating into Roman territory, but not all. The Hunnic kingdom dominated and incorporated many tribes like the Gepids, the Thuringians, the Lombards, the Ostrogoths, the Heruli and the Rugian. When Attila the Hun died on his wedding night, his large empire practically vanished, giving independence to the tribes once under his control. In 453 AD, the Ostrogothic kingdom established themselves within the borders of the Roman Empire in the lands of Pannonia.
When the Hunnish Empire broke in pieces on the death of Attila, AD 453, the East Goths recovered their full independence. They now entered into relations with the empire and settled on lands in Pannonia.
Likewise, the Lombards regained their freedom after the death of Attila the Hun.
Attila's sudden death, either by hemorrhage or the vengeance of his Burgundian bride, checked the progress of the Hunnish Empire. The Ostrogoths, the Gepidi, and the Langobards obtained their independence after a severe struggle, whilst the remains of the nomadic Huns were lost in the rich pastoral steppes of southern Russia.
The Lombards first settled within the Roman territory of Noricum in 453 AD. The Thuringians filled some of the void left in Germania by the Great Migration, but did not settle within Roman territory. The Gepids were overthrown by the Ostrogoths, Lombards, and an Asian tribe called the Avars. The Rugians also settled outside of Roman territory. Lastly, in 475 AD, the Heruli moved into Italy under their king Ottoscar. Ottoscar overthrew the last Roman emperor, Romulus, in 476 AD, becoming the first barbarian king over Italy.
Odoacer was the first barbarian who reigned in Italy over a people who had once asserted their just superiority above the rest of mankind.
Rome was finally divided in 476 AD. 10 kingdoms, 10 distinct and independent nations, no more, no less, had fixed themselves within the boundaries of the old Roman Empire. And the prophecy that was spoken and written more than 1,000 years before was literally fulfilled.